Story 1. I became a park ranger because I love the mountains. There's something about the Rockies that gets into your blood. The crisp air, the endless views, the way the aspen trees turn gold in September. I'd been working at Rocky Mountain National Park for 3 years when this happened, back in October 2019. And I thought I'd seen everything these mountains had to offer. I was wrong. The day started perfect. I mean, absolutely picture perfect. I woke up in my cabin near the Beaver Meadows entrance around 5:30 a.m., made myself a strong pot of coffee, and watched the sunrise paint the peaks orange and pink. My shift started at 7, and I was assigned to patrol the western side of the park, specifically the trails around Grand Lake and the Never Summer Mountains. It was a Tuesday, so the crowds were thin, mostly retirees and a few dedicated hikers trying to catch the tail end of fall colors before the serious snow hit. I remember feeling good that morning, really good. My girlfriend Sarah and I had just gotten engaged the weekend before, and I was still riding that high. I'd even brought the trail mix she'd made me, with extra M&Ms because she knew I had a sweet tooth. Little things like that made the job better, you know? I was living my dream, getting paid to spend my days in one of the most beautiful places on earth. The first few hours were routine. I checked in at the Grand Lake entrance station, chatted with Jenny, the ranger working the booth, about her kids' soccer game. I drove the loop road, stopped at a few trailheads, picked up some trash, reminded a couple of tourists that feeding the elk was illegal and dangerous. Standard stuff. Around 11, I got a call on my radio from dispatch. "David, we've got a situation developing near the Lulu City Trail," Maria's voice cackled through. "Hiker called in about 30 minutes ago, said her husband went ahead on the trail around 9 this morning and never came back to their meetup point. She's pretty worried." "Copy that," I replied, already turning my truck around. "Did she say what he was wearing?" "Blue jacket, gray pants, orange backpack. Name's Robert Chen, 54 years old, experienced hiker. His wife says he does this trail all the time and he's always punctual." That last part made my stomach tighten a little. In my experience, when experienced hikers go missing, it's usually more serious than when tourists wander off. Experienced hikers know better than to take stupid risks, which means if something happened, it probably wasn't their fault. I made it to the Lulu City trailhead in 12 minutes, driving a bit faster than I should have. Mrs. Chen was waiting in the parking lot, pacing next to a silver Honda Civic. She was a small woman, maybe 5'2", wearing a yellow windbreaker that looked too big for her. The moment she saw my truck, she rushed over. "Thank God," she said, and I could hear the strain in her voice. "He left his phone in the car. He always does that. He says he wants to disconnect. But he's never late. Never. We were supposed to meet back here at 10:30. I glanced at my watch. 11:17. Not terribly late, but enough to be concerning. "Okay, Mrs. Chen, I need you to tell me exactly where he was planning to go." I pulled out my notebook. "Did he mention any specific spots?" "He was going to do the full loop to the old mining town ruins and back. He said it would take him about 3 hours round trip. He's done it a dozen times. Something's wrong. I can feel it." I've learned to trust a spouse's instincts. "I'm going to head up there right now. I want you to stay here in case he comes back, okay? If he shows up, call dispatch immediately on this number." I handed her a card. "Try not to worry. There are plenty of innocent explanations. Maybe he stopped to take photos, or he's helping another hiker." She nodded, but I could see she didn't believe it. Neither did I really. I grabbed my pack from the truck, first aid kit, emergency supplies, extra water, rope, whistle, flares, and headed up the trail at a quick pace. The Lulu City Trail follows the Colorado River through gorgeous meadows and forests, eventually leading to the remains of an old mining settlement from the 1880s. It's moderately trafficked, but not crowded, especially on a Tuesday in October. The first mile was easy, and I kept my eyes sharp for any sign of Robert Chen. The trail was in good shape, no obvious hazards,
No recent bear sightings in this area, according to our logs. I called out his name every few minutes, my voice echoing off the valley walls. Nothing. As I got deeper into the forest, the atmosphere started to change. It's hard to explain, but you develop a sixth sense about the woods when you spend enough time in them. The birds seemed quieter than usual. The wind had picked up, making the aspen branches clatter together like bones. The temperature was dropping fast. I could see my breath now, even though it had been pleasant in the parking lot. I radioed back to dispatch. "Maria, I'm about 2 miles in. No sign of our missing hiker yet. Weather's turning, though. Feels like we might get an early snow." "Copy that, David. Be careful up there." "You want backup?" "Not yet. Let me get to the ruins first. If I haven't found him by then, send Tom up with the search dog." "Will do. Check in every 30 minutes." The trail climbed steadily, and I pushed my pace, trying to make good time. When you're searching for someone, every minute counts. I passed a couple of day hikers heading down, an older man with a long gray beard and a woman who might have been his wife. "Excuse me, folks," I called out. "You haven't seen a hiker in a blue jacket, orange backpack, have you? Asian man, 50s? The man shook his head. "Haven't seen anyone for the last hour or so. Trail's pretty empty today. If you see him on your way down, tell him to stay put and that a ranger is looking for him, okay?" They agreed and continued down. I kept climbing. The ruins of Lulu City appeared after another 45 minutes of hiking. Just collapsed log cabins and rusted mining equipment scattered across a meadow. It's a ghostly place, even in good weather, and today it felt especially desolate. The clouds had rolled in, thick and gray, blocking out the sun. The temperature had dropped at least 15 degrees in the last hour. "Robert Chen!" I shouted, my voice carrying across the empty meadow. "Mr. Chen, this is Park Ranger David Hernandez. If you can hear me, please respond." Only the wind answered, rattling through the skeletal remains of the old buildings. I searched the area systematically, checking inside the collapsed structures, looking for any sign that someone had been here recently. That's when I found it. A granola bar wrapper, the kind that comes in those variety packs from Costco, lying next to one of the old cabins. It was fresh, not weathered, and it definitely hadn't been there long. My radio crackled. "David, it's Maria. How's it looking?" "Found possible evidence he made it to the ruins, but no sign of him. I'm going to do a wider search of the area. Tell Mrs. Chen I found something that suggests he's been here." "Copy. And David, Weather Service just issued an alert. Snow moving in fast, could be heavy. They're saying maybe 6 inches by nightfall." "Damn! How long do I have?" "Maybe 2 hours of decent visibility, 3 at most." I made a decision. Send Tom up with Ranger and the emergency gear. Have him bring the thermal imaging camera too. I'm not leaving until we find this guy. For the next hour and a half, I searched every inch of the area around Lulu City. I walked in expanding circles, checked every game trail and deer path, looked for broken branches, disturbed ground, anything. The snow started falling around 2 o'clock, light at first, then heavier, big fat flakes that stuck to everything. Tom arrived at 2:45 with Ranger, our German Shepherd search and rescue dog. Tom was a good guy, 28, built like a linebacker, and completely unflappable. We'd worked together on a dozen search and rescues. "Mrs. Chen is losing it," he said, as Ranger sniffed around the ruins. "What do you think happened?" "I don't know, man. It doesn't make sense. He's experienced. The weather was fine this morning. There's no sign of a fall or animal attack. I gestured at the wilderness around us. It's like he just vanished." Ranger suddenly perked up, his ears forward, staring at something in the tree line to the north. He let out a low whine. "What is it, boy?" Tom asked, following the dog's gaze. That's when we heard it, a voice, faint and distant, barely audible over the wind. "Help! Tom and I locked eyes. "North," I said, already moving. "Come on!" We crashed through the underbrush, Ranger leading the way, his nose to the ground. The voice came again, stronger now, definitely male. "Help! Please! Someone!" "Robert Chen!" I shouted. "Keep making noise! We're coming to you!" We found him about a quarter-mile from the ruins, in a small ravine that wasn't visible from the main trail. He was lying at the bottom, his right leg bent at a wrong angle, his orange backpack still on. Blood had soaked through his gray pants.
"Oh, thank God," he gasped as we scrambled down to him. His face was pale, lips blue. I thought no one would find me. Tom was already on the radio calling for emergency evacuation while I assessed Robert's injuries. Compound fracture of the tibia, possible head trauma, definitely hypothermic. He'd been down here for hours. "What happened?" I asked, pulling an emergency blanket from my pack and wrapping it around him. I was taking pictures of the ruins," he said through chattering teeth. "Then I heard something in the woods, something big. I thought maybe it was an elk, so I followed the sound, wanted to get a photo. I know, stupid. But I didn't go far, I swear. Maybe 50 feet off the trail." "Then what?" His eyes got distant, confused. "Then, I don't know. I don't remember. One second I was standing there, camera up, and the next second I was falling, like something pushed me. But there was nothing there. Nothing. Just air." He grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. I swear to God, I felt hands on my back. Tom caught my eye over Robert's head. We were both thinking the same thing. Head trauma, confusion, shock. People imagine all sorts of things when they're hurt and scared. "You probably got disoriented, stepped too close to the edge," I said gently. "The important thing is we found you. Helicopter's coming." But Robert kept shaking his head. No, you don't understand. Before I fell, right before, I smelled something. Like rot. Like something dead. And I heard," trailed off, his eyes wide. "Heard what?" "Laughing. Someone laughing." The helicopter arrived 30 minutes later. We got Robert loaded up. His wife rode with him. Before they took off, she grabbed my hand. "Thank you," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for finding him." "Just doing my job, ma'am. He's gonna be okay." As the helicopter disappeared into the snowy sky, Tom and I started the long hike back. The snow was coming down hard now, already covering our tracks. "You believe him?" Tom asked after a while. "About being pushed?" "No," I said. But I wasn't sure. There was something about the way Robert had looked, the genuine terror in his eyes. We made it back to the trailhead just as darkness fell. I went home, took a long hot shower, called Sarah and told her about my day. She made me promise to be careful, said she didn't want to be a widow before she was even a wife. I laughed it off, but that night I had trouble sleeping. I kept thinking about what Robert had said. Hands on his back, laughter, the smell of rot. 3 days later, on Friday, I was back on duty. The snow had melted off quickly, as it often does in October, and the park was busy with weekend visitors. I wasn't scheduled to patrol the Lulu City area, but around lunchtime, I got a call from Jenny at the Grand Lake entrance. "Hey David, kind of a weird question, but has anyone reported strange things happening up at Lulu City lately?" My stomach dropped. "What kind of strange things?" "I've got a hiker here, came down about an hour ago. Says she had a really unsettling experience up there. Won't go into details, but she's pretty shaken up. Wanted to file a report. I'll be right there." The hiker's name was Amanda Price, mid-30s, from Denver. She was an experienced backpacker, the kind of person who does 14ers for fun. She didn't seem like the type to spook easily, which made her story more concerning. "I know this is going to sound crazy," she said, sitting in the entrance station with a cup of coffee clutched in both hands. "But something's wrong up there, at those ruins." "Okay." "I got there around 10 this morning. beautiful day, right? Sunny, warm. I was alone, which was nice. I was taking pictures, exploring the old cabins. Then I went into one of the more intact buildings, one of the bigger ones toward the back of the site. Okay. The second I stepped inside, the temperature dropped. I mean, it went from like 60 degrees to freezing in an instant. And the smell, she shuddered, like something had died in there. But there was nothing. No dead animal, nothing. Could have been a thermal pocket, I suggested. The old buildings can create weird temperature. I heard someone breathing right behind me. Heavy breathing, like someone had been running. I spun around. Nobody there. But David, Ranger David. She looked me dead in the eye. I felt breath on my neck, hot breath, and then something touched my shoulder.
The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I ran, she continued. Didn't even grab my backpack, just ran. Got all the way back to the trailhead before I realized I'd left it. There's $300 worth of gear up there, and I'm not going back for it. Not for anything. I took her statement, assured her I'd check it out, and sent her on her way with a promise that we'd retrieve her backpack. Then I sat in my truck for a long moment, thinking. 2 incidents in less than a week, both at Lulu City. Robert Chen felt hands push him and heard laughter. Amanda Price felt breath and a touch on her shoulder. Both mentioned strange smells. Coincidence? Maybe. Probably. But I'd been a ranger long enough to know that sometimes the mountains held things that couldn't be easily explained. I should have requested backup. That's what protocol dictated. But some stubborn part of me, the part that had become a ranger to prove I wasn't afraid of the wilderness, decided to go alone. Just a quick trip up to retrieve Amanda's backpack and do a welfare check of the area. I'd be back before dark. The hike up was uneventful. The trail was busy with afternoon hikers, the weather perfect. I passed a family with 2 kids, a couple of college students, an older gentleman walking his dog. Normal. Everything felt normal. Until I got to the ruins. The meadow was empty. The other hikers had apparently turned back before reaching this point, which wasn't unusual. Lulu City was a decent hike, and most casual visitors didn't make it all the way. I stood at the edge of the ruins, Amanda's description echoing in my mind. One of the bigger buildings toward the back of the site. I knew which one she meant. There was a larger cabin structure, more intact than the others, that we usually warned hikers away from because the floor was unstable. I'd been inside it dozens of times during my years in the park, always without incident. I approached it slowly, every sense alert. The sun was bright overhead, birds singing in the trees. Nothing seemed wrong. I pulled out my flashlight, unnecessary in the daylight, but it made me feel better, and stepped through the doorway. The temperature drop hit me immediately. Amanda had been right. It was like walking into a refrigerator. My breath came out in clouds. "Hello?" I called out, feeling foolish. "This is Park Ranger David Hernandez. Anyone in here?" The smell came next, not gradual, but all at once, so strong it made me gag. Decay, death, rot. I covered my nose and mouth with my jacket sleeve, sweeping my flashlight around the interior. The building was empty, except for some old crates and rusted mining equipment. No dead animals, no source for the smell. That's when I noticed something I'd never seen before. On the far wall, partially hidden behind a collapsed beam, were markings, scratches in the old wood, dozens of them, covering a section about 3 feet square. I stepped closer, my flashlight beam revealing the pattern. They weren't random, they were tally marks, hundreds of them, carved deep into the wood. And below them, scratched in rough letters, "They don't leave."
My radio crackled, making me jump. "David, this is dispatch. You okay? Didn't ditch your check-in." I'd forgotten to radio in when I reached the ruins. "Yeah, I'm fine. I'm at Lulu City, retrieving that abandoned backpack. Found something weird though. The breathing started. Just like Amanda described, heavy, ragged breathing right behind me, so close I could feel it on my neck. I spun around, my hand going instinctively to the bear spray on my belt. Nothing. The doorway was empty, sunlight streaming through, but the breathing continued, and now there was something else, a sound like fingernails scraping on wood, slow and deliberate. "David?" Maria's voice on the radio sounded distant. "David, you're breaking up. Say again?" The temperature dropped even further. I could see frost forming on the metal equipment around me. My flashlight flickered, dimmed, then went out completely. In the darkness, something laughed, low and mean and utterly inhuman.
I ran. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I abandoned every bit of ranger training, every protocol, and I ran like my life depended on it. Out of the building, across the meadow, onto the trail. I didn't stop running until I was a full mile away, back in the forest, surrounded by afternoon sunlight and the sounds of normal birds and wind in the trees. My radio crackled again. "David, respond! Are you okay?" I leaned against a tree, gasping for breath, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the radio. I'm okay. I'm coming back down, but Maria, we need to close that area. The ruins. Close it now." "What? Why? What happened?" "Just trust me. Close it. I'll explain when I get back." I made it to the trailhead in record time. I didn't retrieve Amanda's backpack. I didn't do a thorough check of the area. I got the hell out of there, and I didn't look back. That night, I did something I'd never done before. I researched the history of Lulu City, really dug into it. Most people know it was a mining town in the 1880s, that it failed quickly when the silver didn't pan out. But there was more to the story. In the winter of 1884, the entire population of Lulu City, about 40 people, vanished. Not left, vanished. They found the town completely abandoned in early spring, fires still burning in the stoves, food on the tables, personal belongings untouched. Search parties found no bodies, no signs of struggle, no indication of where anyone had gone. The few miners who had been working claims outside of town refused to go back. They claimed the place was wrong, that something in the mountains had claimed the town. Most people dismissed it as superstition, as miners abandoning their claims when the silver ran out. But one account, buried in an old newspaper archive from Denver, included an interview with a miner named Thomas Brennan. He said that in the weeks before the disappearance, people reported strange occurrences, objects moving on their own, sounds of laughter in empty buildings, the smell of decay with no source, and several people claimed to have been touched by invisible hands. I closed my laptop and sat in the dark for a long time. The next morning, I submitted my report to my supervisor, Bill Hodges. I told him everything: Robert Chen, Amanda Price, my own experience. I recommended we close the Lulu City Trail indefinitely, pending a safety investigation. Bill listened to my whole story without interrupting. Then he leaned back in his chair and sighed. "David, you've been a good ranger. You know I respect you. But I can't close a major trail because of some cold spots and weird smells. You know what the publicity would do to us? We'd be a laughingstock. Bill, something's not right up there." "Look, I'll send a team to do a structural assessment of those old buildings, okay? If any of them are unsafe, we'll fence them off. But I can't close the trail. I just can't. I wanted to argue, but I knew it was pointless. Without concrete evidence, and I heard breathing and got scared, didn't count. There was nothing I could do. For the next few weeks, I avoided the Lulu City area. I requested different patrol routes, took extra shifts at other parts of the park. I told myself I was being irrational, that there had to be logical explanations for everything I'd experienced. But I couldn't shake the memory of that laughter, were the tally marks on the wall. They don't leave. Then, on a gray November morning, Maria called me into the dispatch office. Her face was pale. "We've got another missing hiker," she said quietly. "Lulu City Trail. Didn't come back yesterday evening." My blood ran cold. "Who?" "Young guy, 23, name of Christopher Walsh, from Fort Collins. He's a grad student at CSU, experienced outdoorsman. His roommate says he went up there to photograph the early snow. That was yesterday at noon. It's been over 24 hours. I didn't hesitate. "I'm going up." "David, I don't think—" "I'm going up. Get Tom and Ranger, and Maria, call in the county search and rescue team. All of them." We found Christopher Walsh 4 hours later. He was standing in the middle of the Lulu City ruins, perfectly still, staring at nothing. He was hypothermic, frostbitten, but alive. When we approached him, he didn't respond.
Didn't acknowledge us at all. It took both Tom and I to physically move him, and even then he didn't resist or help. He was like a statue. We got him down the mountain and to the hospital. The doctors said he would recover physically, but there was something wrong. He wouldn't speak, wouldn't respond to questions, just stared straight ahead with this blank expression. His roommate told us that after 3 days, Christopher finally spoke. Just one sentence, repeated over and over. "They wanted me to stay. They want everyone to stay." That was enough for Bill. The Lulu City Trail was closed indefinitely. Official reason, structural hazards and wildlife management concerns. The real reason stayed between a few of us. I quit the Park Service a month later. I couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't spend my days in those mountains knowing what was up there. Sarah understood, even though I couldn't tell her the whole truth. We moved to Boulder, and I got a job with the city parks department. Much safer, much more normal. But sometimes, on quiet nights, I think about those ruins. I think about the tally marks on the wall, about Robert Chen's broken leg and Amanda's abandoned backpack and Christopher Walsh's blank stare. I think about the 40 people who vanished in 1884, and I wonder if they're still there in some way. If whatever claimed them is still hungry, still waiting in those empty buildings for the next person to step inside. The Lulu City Trail reopened last spring. They removed the most dangerous structures and put up warning signs. Hikers go up there every day now, taking pictures of the ruins, never knowing what might be waiting in the shadows. I hope they're careful. I hope they stay on the trail, and I hope they never, ever go inside those buildings, because some places in the mountains aren't empty at all. They're just waiting.
Story 2. I never believed in anything I couldn't see or touch. That's probably why I became a park ranger in the first place. I loved the concrete reality of nature, the way everything had a logical explanation. Animals behaved according to instinct, weather followed patterns, geological formations told stories millions of years old. The natural world made sense to me in a way that people never quite did. That all changed in June 2017 in the Red Rock country of Arizona. I'd been working for the Arizona State Parks system for 5 years by then, stationed primarily around the Sedona area. If you've never been to Sedona, it's hard to explain how beautiful it is. The rock formations glow red and orange in the sunlight, towering hundreds of feet above the desert floor. Locals and tourists alike claim the area has vortexes, places where spiritual energy concentrates. I always smiled and nodded when people talked about that stuff, but privately I thought it was nonsense. Pretty rocks are just pretty rocks. My main assignment that summer was managing the Cathedral Rock Trail system and the surrounding backcountry. Cathedral Rock is one of Sedona's most iconic formations. It looks like a massive red stone cathedral rising out of the desert, hence the name. The main trail is only about 1.5 miles round trip, but it's steep and challenging, with some scrambling required near the top. We got everything from experienced climbers to flip-flop wearing tourists who had no business being on that trail. June in Sedona is brutal. Temperatures regularly hit 105, sometimes higher. We had signs everywhere warning people to bring water, to start early, to know their limits. Every summer we'd have to rescue people suffering from heat exhaustion or dehydration. It was part of the job, frustrating but manageable. The day everything changed started like any other. I woke up at 5 a.m. in my apartment in West Sedona, made my usual breakfast of eggs and toast, and headed to the ranger station by 6:30. My partner that day was supposed to be Marcus, a guy about my age who I'd worked with dozens of times. Good guy, reliable, had a wife and baby at home. But when I got to the station, my supervisor Janet was waiting with bad news. Marcus called in sick, she said, pouring herself what had to be her third cup of coffee. Some kind of stomach bug. I'm trying to get someone to cover, but it might just be you today. I shrugged. I can handle it. Cathedral Rock on a Tuesday shouldn't be too crazy. Famous last words, Janet laughed. Be careful out there. Weather Service says it might hit 108 today. I loaded up my truck with extra water, first aid supplies, and all the usual gear. The drive to the Cathedral Rock trailhead took about 15 minutes, winding through neighborhoods of expensive homes built right up against the red rocks. Even after 5 years, the scenery still took my breath away sometimes. The morning light was perfect, making the rocks glow like they were lit from within. The parking lot was already half full when I arrived at 7:15 a.m., early birds trying to beat the heat. I recognized a few regular hikers, nodded hello, and started my patrol. The first few hours were routine. I helped a family from Texas figure out the trail map, reminded a couple of teenagers that climbing off trail was prohibited, and talked a middle-aged woman out of attempting the summit in sandals. Around 10:30, I was near the base of the main formation, taking a water break in what little shade I could find, when I noticed something odd. There was a man standing about 50 yards off the main trail, just staring up at the rocks. Nothing unusual about that. People stopped to admire the view all the time. But something about his posture seemed off. He was completely motionless, hadn't moved an inch in the 5 minutes I'd been watching him. I approached him, calling out a friendly "good morning" as I got closer. He didn't respond, didn't even turn his head. "Sir, are you all right?" Still nothing. I got close enough to see him clearly now. He was maybe 60 years old, wearing khaki hiking pants and a white shirt that was soaked with sweat. His skin looked flushed, possible heat exhaustion. But his eyes were what really bothered me. They were wide open, unblinking, fixed on a specific point on the rock face above us. "Sir, I'm Ranger Martinez. Can you hear me?" I touched his shoulder gently. He gasped, a sharp, sudden intake of breath, and stumbled backward, nearly falling. His eyes finally focused on me, and I saw confusion and something else. Fear, maybe. What? Where? He looked around, disoriented. How long have I been standing here? I don't know, sir. I've been watching you for about 5 minutes, but you seemed like you were in some kind of trance. Are you feeling okay? Have you been drinking enough water? He fumbled for his water bottle with shaking hands and took a long drink. I'm fine, I think.
I was hiking, and then I saw something on the rocks up there, and I don't remember. What time is it? 10:35. His face went pale. That's impossible. It was 9:15 when I started hiking. I've only been on the trail for 20 minutes, maybe. I couldn't have been standing here for over an hour. But he had been. I could see it in his sunburned face, the way his lips were cracked and dry. Sir, I think you might have had a heat-related episode. I need you to come sit in the shade and drink more water. What's your name? Paul. Paul Reeves. I'm from Flagstaff. He let me guide him to a shaded area near the trail. This doesn't make sense. I don't remember anything after I looked up and saw what? He was quiet for a moment, drinking more water, his hands still trembling slightly. It's gonna sound crazy. Try me. I've heard everything working this trail. I saw a doorway in the rock. It was just suddenly there, like a shadow, but perfectly rectangular. And there was someone standing in it. A woman, I think. She was beckoning to me. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. See? Crazy. It must have been a hallucination from the heat. I wanted to agree with him, to chalk it up to heat exhaustion and dehydration. But something about the way he described it made my skin prickle. Where exactly did you see this doorway? He pointed to a section of the rock face, about 30 feet up, accessible only by serious climbing equipment. Right there. But there's nothing there now, obviously. Just rock. I looked. He was right. Just red sandstone. No unusual shadows or formations. Okay, Paul. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to walk you back to the parking lot, and I want you to go home, rest, drink lots of fluids. If you feel dizzy or confused later, go to urgent care, okay? He agreed readily, seeming eager to leave. I escorted him back to his car, a sensible Subaru with Flagstaff plates, and watched him drive away. Then I stood in the parking lot for a moment, thinking. A doorway in the rock, a woman beckoning, an hour of missing time. I should have written it off as heat stroke. That's what my rational mind told me to do. But something nagged at me, some instinct I didn't know I had. I decided to hike back up to the spot where I'd found Paul Reeves and take a closer look at that section of rock face. It probably was nothing, but it wouldn't hurt to check. Maybe there was an unusual shadow pattern that could explain what he'd seen. The hike back took 15 minutes. The temperature was climbing toward its peak now, and even I was feeling the heat despite my acclimatization. I reached the spot and stood where Paul had been standing, looking up at the rock face he'd indicated. At first, I saw nothing unusual, just the normal texture and color variations of sedimentary rock, shaped by millions of years of wind and water. I was about to give up and head back, when the angle of the sun shifted slightly. A cloud must have moved, and suddenly, I saw it. A shadow, perfectly rectangular, exactly where Paul had pointed. It appeared for just a moment, maybe 5 seconds, and then it was gone as the sun's angle changed again. My rational mind immediately supplied an explanation. Just a coincidence of light and shadow, a trick of perspective. But I couldn't shake the image from my head. It had looked so deliberate, so precise. I marked the location with my GPS and continued my patrol, pushing the incident to the back of my mind. The rest of the day was busy. I helped 3 different groups of hikers, gave directions a dozen times, and confiscated alcohol from some college kids who thought they were being sneaky. By the time my shift ended at 6 p.m.,
I was exhausted, sunburned despite my sunscreen, and ready for a cold shower and dinner. But that night, I couldn't stop thinking about Paul Reeves and his missing hour. I did something I almost never did. I went online and started researching. Not the geology of Cathedral Rock, which I already knew inside and out, but the folklore, the stories, the legends. What I found surprised me. Cathedral Rock was supposedly one of the 4 main vortex sites in Sedona, places where the spiritual energy was the strongest. But beyond the New Age stuff about chakras and meditation, there were older stories, Native American legends about the rocks being doorways to other places, other worlds. Stories about people who went into the rocks and never came back. Stories about mysterious women who appeared in the desert, leading travelers astray. Most of it was clearly embellished folklore, the kind of stories that grow and change with each telling. But there were also documented cases, not many, but enough to be interesting, of people reporting missing time near Cathedral Rock. A hiker in 1998 who claimed she'd been gone for 15 minutes, but came back to find 3 hours had passed. A photographer in 2003 who set up his camera for sunset shots and woke up the next morning with no memory of the intervening hours. The reports were always dismissed as heat stroke, dehydration, or attention-seeking, and they probably were. But the similarity to Paul's experience was unsettling. I closed my laptop and told myself I was being ridiculous. I was a scientist, damn it. I didn't believe in doorways to other worlds or mysterious women in the desert. There were rational explanations for everything. I almost convinced myself. The next morning, Wednesday, I was back at Cathedral Rock by 7 a.m. Janet raised her eyebrow when I volunteered for the same location 2 days in a row. Usually we rotated assignments. But Marcus was still sick, so I was solo again.
The day started normally. I did my usual patrol, checked in with hikers, made sure everyone had adequate water. But I found myself repeatedly drawn back to that spot, the place where I'd found Paul Reeves. I stood there during my lunch break, watching the light change on the rocks, waiting to see if that rectangular shadow would appear again. It didn't, not while I was watching anyway. Around 2 p.m., during the hottest part of the day when most sensible people had retreated to air conditioning, I got a call on my radio. It was Janet, and her voice was tense. "Rebecca, we've got a situation. Missing hiker, Cathedral Rock area. Woman, mid-30s, named Lisa Chen. Her husband says she went up the trail around 1 p.m. and should have been back by now. He's worried because she left her water bottle in the car." My stomach dropped. No water and 105-degree heat? That was a recipe for disaster. Copy that. Description? Blue tank top, black shorts, long dark hair and a ponytail. Athletic build. Husband says she's an experienced hiker but doesn't know the area well. They're visiting from California. I'm on it. How long has she been missing? He says she left at 1:10. It's 2:15 now. Over an hour. I was already moving, heading up the trail at a quick pace, my eyes scanning for any sign of a woman in blue. I called her name every few minutes. "Lisa Chen, this is Park Ranger Martinez. If you can hear me, please respond." Nothing but the sound of wind through the rocks and the distant call of a raven. I searched for 2 hours, covering every inch of the main trail and checking the most common places where people went off path. The temperature was hitting its peak, 108 degrees according to my thermometer, and I was going through water fast, despite my conditioning. If Lisa was out here without water, she was in serious trouble. At 4:20 p.m., I was about to call for additional search and rescue resources when I heard something. A voice, faint and distant, coming from somewhere off the trail to the east. I froze, listening. "Help! Someone! Please!" I followed the voice, pushing through scrub brush and around boulders. "Lisa, keep calling out! I'm coming to you!"
I found her 10 minutes later, collapsed in the shade of a large boulder about a quarter-mile off trail. She was conscious but barely, her lips cracked and bleeding, her skin dangerously hot to the touch, severe heat stroke. "Lisa, I'm Ranger Martinez. I've got you. You're going to be okay." I immediately started first aid, got her into better shade, started cooling her down with water, called for emergency medical transport. "What happened? How did you get all the way out here?" Her eyes struggled to focus on me. "Followed her," she mumbled. "The woman. She said, 'Water. This way.'" My blood ran cold. "What woman?" "In white. She was on the trail. Said there was water. Followed her." Lisa's eyes closed, but she kept going. Couldn't catch up. So thirsty. I got an IV started. I was trained for this, had done it dozens of times, and kept working to bring her temperature down. Within 20 minutes, a medical helicopter arrived, and we got her loaded up. The paramedics said she'd probably survive, but it had been close. Lisa's husband was distraught when I gave him the news. She followed someone? There was another hiker who led her off trail? That's what she said, but I didn't see anyone else out there, and we haven't had any reports of another missing person. I tried to keep my voice calm, professional. It's possible she was already experiencing heat stroke and hallucinated someone. It happens. He accepted that explanation, thanking me profusely for saving his wife's life. After he drove to the hospital, I stood in the parking lot as the sun began to set, painting the rocks in shades of crimson and gold. 2 incidents in 2 days, both involving mysterious sightings. A doorway with a woman inside, a woman in white leading someone off trail, both at Cathedral Rock. I should have reported it, should have at least mentioned the pattern to Janet, but I knew what would happen. She'd tell me it was just coincidence, just heat stroke, just the usual hazards of the desert. And maybe she'd be right, but maybe she wouldn't be. That night, I made a decision. I was going to spend a full day at that specific location, the spot where Paul had seen his doorway, where that rectangular shadow had appeared. I was going to document everything, take measurements, photographs, notes. I even brought my old geology textbooks from college. I reached the spot just as the sun was rising, around 5:30 a.m. The rocks glowed pink and orange in the early light. Absolutely beautiful. I set up my observation post and started taking notes. Temperature, 72 degrees Fahrenheit. Wind, light from the southwest. Sky, clear. Time, 5:33 a.m. I photographed the rock face from every angle, measuring the shadows, noting how the light changed as the sun climbed higher. By 8 a.m., I had dozens of photos and pages of notes.
Nothing unusual. Just rocks being rocks. Shadows following the laws of physics. I was starting to feel foolish. What was I expecting to find? A literal doorway in solid stone? A woman made of smoke standing on the rocks? But I stayed, methodical and thorough. At 9:15 a.m., the same time Paul Reeves had reported seeing his doorway, I watched the rock face carefully. The sun angle was changing, shadows shifting, and then there it was. The rectangular shadow appeared, exactly as before. But now, with my camera ready, I snapped a dozen photos in quick succession. The shadow lasted about 10 seconds before vanishing as the sun continued its arc across the sky. I immediately reviewed the photos on my camera's display. In every single one, the shadow was there, crisp and clear. Perfectly rectangular, about 6 feet tall and 3 feet wide. Exactly like a doorway. My hands were shaking slightly as I downloaded the photos to my laptop. I enhanced the images, adjusted the contrast, zoomed in. The shadow was real, The camera had captured it, but it was just a shadow, created by the specific angle of sunlight hitting irregular rock surfaces. There had to be a logical explanation. I was so focused on my laptop screen that I didn't notice anything wrong until I heard the voice. "You can see it too." I jumped, nearly dropping my computer, and spun around. There was a woman standing about 20 feet away, between me and the main trail. I hadn't heard her approach at all. She was maybe 50, with long gray hair loose around her shoulders, wearing a white linen dress that seemed impractical for hiking. Her feet were bare. She was smiling at me, but there was something off about that smile. Something that made me instinctively reach for the radio on my belt. "I'm sorry, I didn't hear you come up. Ma'am, this area is pretty remote. Are you out here hiking? Do you have water?" She didn't answer my question, just kept smiling that strange smile. "You're different from the others. You don't just see it and forget. You came back. You're trying to understand." Understand what? Against my better advice, I was engaging with her. But something about her presence was deeply unsettling. The doorway, it's always been there, you know. Long before your people built your trails and your signs, the old ones knew about it. They knew where it led. She took a step closer, and I took an involuntary step back. "Ma'am, I think maybe you've been in the sun too long. Let me call someone to." 3 days. That's how long you have. 3 days, and then the door will open fully. It only happens once every 7 years when the light is just right. They'll come through, and they'll need guides. That's what I do. I guide them. My rational mind was screaming at me that this woman was clearly disturbed, possibly dangerous. But another part of me, a part I didn't know existed until that moment, believed her. Or at least believed that she believed what she was saying. "Who will come through?" I heard myself ask. Her smile widened. "The ones who live in the spaces between. The ones who were here first, before the rocks, before the sky. They're hungry, Ranger Martinez. So very hungry. And every 7 years, they get to feed." She knew my name. I'd never introduced myself, and I wasn't wearing a name tag. "How do you know who I am?" "I know everyone who comes here. I watch. I wait. And when the time is right, I guide them to the door. Like I guided that man yesterday. Like I guided that woman who was so thirsty. They would have made good offerings, but you interfered. You shouldn't have done that." Ice ran through my veins despite the climbing heat. "You led Lisa Chen off trail? You nearly killed her." "She would have died regardless. Better to serve a purpose than to die for nothing." The woman in white started walking towards me, her bare feet seeming to glide over the rough desert ground. I backed away, my hand on my radio. "Stay where you are. Don't come any closer." She laughed, and it was the worst sound I'd ever heard, like wind through empty caves, like stones grinding together. And then she was gone. Not walked away, not ran off, just gone, like she'd never been there at all. 1 second, she was 10 feet away from me. The next second, I was staring at empty air. I spun around wildly, looking for her. "Hello? Where did you go?" Nothing.
No sign of her anywhere. No footprints in the dust. No disturbed vegetation. It was like she'd been a hallucination. But she knew my name. She knew about Paul and Lisa. She couldn't have been a hallucination. Could she? I packed up my equipment with shaking hands and practically ran back to the parking lot. I sat in my truck for a full 10 minutes, door locked, air conditioning blasting, trying to make sense of what had just happened. 3 days. She had said 3 days until the door opened fully. That meant Sunday. I drove straight to the ranger station, my mind racing.
I found Janet in her office, buried in paperwork as usual. Janet, I need to talk to you about Cathedral Rock. She looked up, concerned by the tone in my voice. What's wrong? Did something happen? I told her everything. The incidents with Paul and Lisa, my observation session this morning, the woman in white. As I talked, I watched her expression change from concern to skepticism to something like pity. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, very gently, Rebecca, when was the last time you took a real vacation? More than just a day or two? This isn't about stress, Janet. I know what I saw. I believe that you saw something. But Rebecca, you've been working too hard. This heat, the long shifts, the intensity of the rescue yesterday, it can affect anyone. I've seen it happen to good rangers before. But the photos, I have photos of the shadow, the doorway. I'm sure you do. And I'm sure there's a geological explanation for an unusual shadow formation. But a disappearing woman in white who predicts the future? Rebecca, listen to yourself. I wanted to argue, but I could see it was pointless. She thought I was having a breakdown. Maybe I was. Fine. Can I at least request that we increase patrols in that area this weekend, just as a precaution? Janet considered this. That I can do. We've had enough incidents there this week that it makes sense to have a stronger presence. I'll put you and Marcus on Saturday and Tom and Sarah on Sunday. Would that make you feel better? It would have to do. Yes, thank you. I went home that afternoon feeling defeated and confused. Was Janet right? Was I losing my grip on reality? The woman in white had seemed so real, so solid, but she'd vanished into thin air. People didn't do that, unless they weren't people at all. I spent Thursday night and all day Friday researching everything I could find about Cathedral Rock, going back decades, even centuries. I found more stories of missing time, strange sightings, people who went into the rocks and never came back. Most of it was dismissed as legend or explained away by natural causes. But there was a pattern. Every 7 years, there was a spike in unusual incidents at Cathedral Rock. Nothing huge, nothing that made headlines, but enough to be statistically significant if you were looking for it. 7 years ago, a hiker vanished for 3 days and was found naked and delirious, claiming she'd been inside the mountain. 14 years ago, a couple reported seeing figures made of shadow emerging from the rocks at sunset. 21 years ago, a photographer's camera mysteriously captured images he never remembered taking. Images of doorways and passages inside solid rock. The pattern went back as far as I could find records, always 7 years apart, always in early June. Saturday arrived too quickly. Marcus was finally feeling better, and we met at the Cathedral Rock trailhead at 6 a.m. I'd briefed him on everything. Well, almost everything. I left out the woman in white. Didn't want him thinking I was crazy too. So we're just doing extra patrols because of the heat incidents this week? He asked as we started up the trail. Right. Making sure everyone stays safe, stays on trail, has enough water. It was a busy day. Saturday always brought more visitors, and we were constantly stopping to help people, answer questions, enforce trail rules. By 2 p.m., we'd talked to probably 50 different hikers. And then, around 3 p.m., Marcus radioed me. I was near the summit, and he was down by that spot. The spot where everything had happened. "Rebecca, I've got something weird here. Can you come down?" I made my way down as quickly as I could, my heart pounding. "What is it?" Marcus was standing exactly where I'd found Paul Reeves, staring up at the rock face. I could swear I saw something, a shadow, but perfectly rectangular, like a door. It was only there for a second. My mouth went dry. "Show me exactly where." He pointed to the exact spot. "Right there, but when I looked again, it was gone." "Marcus, I need you to listen to me carefully. If you see it again, don't stare at it. Don't fixate on it. And whatever you do, if you see a woman in white, do not follow her or listen to anything she says." He looked at me like I'd grown a second head. "A woman in white? Marcus, what's really going on?" Before I could answer, both our radios crackled to life. It was Tom, who was supposed to be patrolling a different area. "All Rangers, be advised. We've got multiple reports of hikers seeing strange things near Cathedral Rock. Some kind of mass hallucination event, possibly related to the heat. Requesting all available personnel to assist with crowd control and safety checks." Marcus and I looked at each other. "It's starting," I said. "Tomorrow is Sunday. That's when she said it would fully open." "When who said what would open?" "Rebecca, you're freaking me out." "The woman in white. The doorway in the rocks."
Marcus, I think something is going to happen tomorrow. Something bad. We need to close this trail. But even as I said it, I knew it wouldn't happen. We'd need approval from multiple levels of management. Would need concrete evidence of danger. Strange shadows and creepy feelings wouldn't cut it. We spent the rest of Saturday managing the crowd and trying to keep people calm. The reports kept coming. Hikers seeing shadows that looked like doorways, hearing voices calling from inside the rocks, feeling compelled to leave the trail. Most people just thought it was weird and headed back down, but a few seemed genuinely disturbed, even traumatized. By the time our shift ended at 6 p.m., I was exhausted and terrified. Tomorrow was the day. Whatever was going to happen would happen tomorrow. I made a decision that night. I was going to be at that spot before dawn on Sunday. I was going to document everything, and if some kind of doorway really did open, I was going to make damn sure no one went through it. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept thinking about the woman in white, about Paul's missing hour and Lisa's near-death experience, about the stories of people vanishing into the rocks. I thought about what might be on the other side of that doorway, what might be hungry enough to wait 7 years between feedings. Sunday morning, I arrived at Cathedral Rock at 4:30 a.m., well before sunrise. The parking lot was empty, dark, except for my headlights. I geared up, extra water, first aid kit, flares, bear spray, not that I thought it would help against whatever this was, and my camera. The hike up in the dark was eerie, my flashlight beam cutting through the blackness, revealing twisted juniper trees and hulking rock formations. I knew this trail by heart, could probably hike it blindfolded, but everything felt different in the pre-dawn darkness. I reached the spot by 5 a.m. and set up my observation post. Then I waited for the sun to rise. The dawn came slowly, painting the sky in shades of purple and pink. The rocks emerged from darkness, first as dark silhouettes, then gradually taking on their characteristic red color. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. At exactly 6:15 a.m., as the sun crested the horizon and its light hit the rock face at a specific angle,
the doorway appeared. But this time, it wasn't just a shadow. This time, there was depth to it. I could see into it, see a passage leading back into the rock, lit by some kind of dim, sourceless light. And standing in that doorway was the woman in white. She was smiling at me. "You came. I knew you would." Every instinct screamed at me to run. But I stood my ground, camera in hand, documenting everything. "What are you? What is this place?" "I told you. I'm a guide. This is the doorway. And they're coming through now. Right now." Behind her, deeper in that impossible passage, I saw movement, shapes, forms that didn't quite make sense to my eyes, that seemed to shift and writhe in ways that hurt to look at. And they were coming forward, toward the opening, toward our world. "No," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "No, I'm not letting them through." She laughed. "How do you plan to stop them? You're just one human, just flesh and bone and fear." I didn't have a plan. I had no idea what I was doing. But I thought about Paul, about Lisa, about all the people who had vanished or been traumatized at this spot. I thought about what the future victims if I did nothing. So I did the only thing I could think of. I walked forward, straight toward that doorway, straight toward the woman in white and the things behind her. "What are you doing?" she asked, and for the first time she sounded uncertain. "I'm closing the door," I said, and stepped through. The transition was instant and nauseating. One moment I was in the familiar desert heat of Arizona, the next I was somewhere else. The passage extended in all directions, defying geometry and logic. The light came from everywhere and nowhere, and the things, the creatures, the entities, whatever they were, surrounded me. They were hungry. I could feel it, radiating off them like heat. They'd been waiting 7 years for this moment, this chance to emerge into our world and feed. But I was inside now, on their side of the doorway, and they weren't expecting that. I thought about all the research I'd done about doorways and thresholds and folklore, about how thresholds have rules, how they need to be willingly crossed, how guards at the threshold hold power. I planted my feet and spread my arms. "You're not getting through. Not today, not ever." The woman in white's face twisted into something monstrous. "You can't stop us. You're nothing." "Maybe," I agreed, "but I'm standing in your doorway, and I'm not moving." I don't know how long I stood there. Time worked differently in that space. It could have been minutes or hours. The things pressed against me, tried to push past me, tried to break me. I felt their hunger, their hatred, their desperate need to cross over. But I didn't move. Eventually, I felt the sun's angle changing. The perfect alignment that had opened the doorway was passing. The light was shifting. "No," the woman in white screamed. "No, it's too soon. We need more time." But time was the one thing they didn't have. The doorway was closing, the passage becoming less solid, less real. And I was still standing in it, blocking their way. The last thing I saw before reality snapped back was her face, twisted in rage, as she and all those hungry things were pulled back into whatever dimension they came from. And then I was standing on the trail again, in the bright Arizona sunlight, alone.
No doorway, no woman in white, no creatures. Just me and the red rocks and the sound of my own labored breathing. I checked my watch. 6:17 a.m. months had passed. I spent the rest of that day at Cathedral Rock, staying close to that spot, watching. The doorway never appeared again. No rectangular shadow, no passage into elsewhere. Just normal rock formations doing normal rock formation things. Tom and Sarah arrived for their shift at 7 a.m., and I told them everything was quiet. They never needed to know what had almost happened. I finally left around noon, exhausted in a way that went beyond physical tiredness. I'd held back something that wanted to break through into our world. Something that had been trying for centuries, maybe longer. The next 7 years would be someone else's problem. Maybe the doorway would try to open again, maybe it wouldn't. But I'd bought time at least. I never saw the woman in white again. The unusual incidents at Cathedral Rock dropped back to normal levels. Life went on. But sometimes in the early morning when I'm alone on the trail, I catch glimpses of something. A flicker of movement in the corner of my eye. A shadow that's just slightly too perfect. A feeling of being watched from somewhere just beyond the solid rock. They're still there, waiting. And in 7 years, they'll try again. I quit the Park Service 6 months after that Sunday. I told Janet I was moving back to Texas to be closer to family. The truth is, I couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't look at those beautiful red rocks without seeing the doorway, without remembering what was on the other side. I work in an office now, surrounded by concrete and steel and fluorescent lights. It's boring and mundane, and absolutely nothing supernatural ever happens. And that's exactly how I like it. But sometimes I wonder who's patrolling Cathedral Rock these days. I wonder if they know to watch for shadows that look like doorways. I wonder if they'll recognize the danger when it comes around again. And I wonder if when the time comes, someone will be there to stand in that threshold and say, no. Because some doors are meant to stay closed, no matter what's on the other side, trying to get through.